The wind screamed through the jagged ruins of the silent empire, a relentless howl that flung ash and grit into Kael's eyes. He crouched on a crumbling spire, a silent guardian overlooking Cinderfall. Below, the city was a patchwork quilt of scavenged stone and flickering lanterns. A fragile home built right on top of the bones of an empire that had devoured itself in fire a century ago. This was his city, a place of gray skies and gray morals. Kael, known in the shadows as the Gray Blade, adjusted the frayed edges of his cloak, letting the fabric merge with the deepening dusk. His breath was a steady rhythm in the biting wind, his hands calloused and sure from a lifetime spent with a dagger. But tonight, a strange disquiet settled in his chest, a feeling as sharp as the blade he carried. The source of his unease was small, tucked away in his pocket a shard of bone, intricately carved with a prophecy that felt like a curse. Asterisk. The silence will burn again. Asterisk. Just 3 nights ago, he had found it. He'd been in the old Imperial crypt, a maze of shattered marble and forgotten gods, the air thick with the dust of ages. Like so many others in Cinderfall, he'd gone there to scavenge, hoping to find something of value left behind by the dead. The silence in the crypt was profound, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water and the crunch of his own boots on fallen debris. He hadn't found gold or jewels. Instead, his torchlight had caught a faint, eerie glow. It was the bone shard, its jagged script pulsing with a soft, ethereal light. Those words, they stirred something deep within him. Echoes of his mother's stories. She used to tell him tales of the silent empire's sorcerer kings, powerful and terrible rulers who commanded a fire so hungry it consumed their own people, their own cities, when the empire finally collapsed under the weight of its own inferno. The survivors, the ancestors of Cinderfall, had sworn an oath of peace. They vowed to never again let such destructive flames rise. Kael, despite his profession, had always lived by that oath. He was an assassin, yes, but he saw himself as a necessary tool, a scalpel to cut out the cancers that threatened Cinderfall's fragile harmony. He only took the lives of those who would see the city fall back into chaos. His current contract was a prime example. Lord Varn, a brutal warlord whose red-cloaked guards prowled the streets like hungry wolves. Varn's rule was a slow-acting poison. His taxes were crippling, bleeding the people dry. Those who dared to speak out simply vanished, swallowed by the night. And worse, whispers followed his men, whispers of black powder stockpiles, of drills and marching, of a new war brewing on the horizon. Kael's mission was, on the surface, straightforward. Get to Varn, slit his throat, and melt back into the shadows. Free Cinderfall, disappear. But the prophecy clung to him like a shroud of damp rot. Asterisk. The silence will burn again. Asterisk. What did it mean? He had assumed Varn was the spark, the catalyst for this new fire. Removing him should douse the flame before it could catch. But as he looked down at the city, at the lives held in a precarious balance, a cold doubt began to form. Was Varn truly the only threat? Or was the prophecy pointing to something else? Something deeper? The thought was unsettling, a phantom touch on the back of his neck. What if he, the Gray Blade, was not the one to stop the fire? What if he was the one destined to start it? The wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of dust and distant sorrows. And for the first time in a long time, Kael felt the chilling grip of uncertainty. He descended from the spire, his movements fluid and silent as a wisp of smoke. The streets of Cinderfall were a labyrinth. He knew better than his own reflection. He moved through the winding alleyways, his boots making no sound on the packed earth and cobblestone. The city was alive with a nervous energy tonight. The flicker of lanterns cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to claw at the walls. He saw the faces of the people, tired, wary, but with a stubborn flicker of resilience in their eyes. These were the people he was fighting for. These were the lives he was meant to protect. His path led him towards the Iron Quarter, where Varn had established his fortress in an old, repurposed foundry. The air here was heavy with the smell of coal and metal. Red-cloaked guards were everywhere, their armor glinting in the firelight. They were disciplined, alert, a far cry from the disorganized thugs that usually plagued the city's outer districts. Varn was building an army, The rumors were true. Kael slipped into a darkened doorway, observing the patrol patterns. He'd spent 2 days watching, learning their routes, their shift changes, the subtle tells of their complacency. There was a gap, a blind spot near the western wall where the shadows were deepest, where the crumbling architecture of the old empire provided perfect cover. That was his entry point. As he prepared to make his move, a small commotion drew his attention. A baker, a man Kael knew by sight, was being dragged from his shop by 2 of Varn's guards. The man's wife was pleading, his children crying. He paid the tax. He paid it yesterday, she screamed, her voice raw with desperation. One of the guards shoved her to the ground. Lord Varn has new expenses, the guard sneered. The city's protection isn't free. Something inside Kael snapped. This wasn't just about power, it was about cruelty. It was the same arrogance that had led the Sorcerer Kings to burn their world. He was supposed to remain detached, a phantom in the night. But watching that family be torn apart for a few extra coins, the Oath of Peace felt like a fragile shield against a rising tide of fire. He didn't think, acte. A stone, thrown with practiced precision, clattered down a side alley. The guards, startled, turned towards the sound, their hands on their swords. It was all the opening Kael needed. He moved from the shadows, a blur of gray. The first guard went down with a silent gurgle, Kael's dagger finding the gap between his helmet and gorget. The second turned, his eyes wide with shock, but he never had a chance to draw his weapon. Kael was already there, his other hand covering the man's mouth as the blade did its swift, brutal work. He helped the baker to his feet. "Go," Kael whispered, his voice a low rasp. "Get your family and stay inside. Don't open your door for anyone." The baker, trembling, could only nod, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and gratitude. He scrambled back into his shop, the door bolting shut with a heavy thud. Kael dragged the bodies into the deepest part of the alley, a sense of grim finality settling over him. He had broken his own rule. He had interfered. This wasn't a clean, surgical strike against a single target. This was messy. It would have repercussions. The patrol would be missed. An alarm would be raised sooner than he'd planned. His carefully constructed plan was already beginning to unravel. He looked down at his hands, slick with blood that wasn't Varn's. The prophecy echoed in his mind, louder this time. Asterisk, silence will burn again. Asterisk, he had just struck a match. He had intended to be the cure for Cinderfall's sickness, but now he feared he was becoming a symptom of it. The path to Varn's throat was still there, but it was now littered with new, unforeseen dongers. And the question still haunted him, more pressing than ever. Was he saving the city, or was he merely igniting its funeral pyre? With a deep, steadying breath, he pushed the doubt aside. He had started this. Now, he had to finish it. He turned back towards the foundry, the gray blade once again consumed by the growing shadows. The night was far from over.